Hi, everyone. This is Thomas Nuth from Tenable, the head of product marketing for cloud and identity security. And today you're joining us for our take on the convergence crisis, our key findings from the 2026 cloud and AI risk report. We released this just prior to RSA in the year, gathering thousands of data points and samples throughout the tail end of 2025. We just think that the nature of this event at CSA, which we, really invest in heavily and enjoy, we just think it's highly relevant for the engineering velocity that we're witnessing here surrounding AI and cloud security. The takeaway here is we all know it. We see how AI is scaling out our work. My job is vastly different than it was 6 months ago, and 6 months ago was vastly different than it was 6 months prior. And that's due to AI. And basically, what we're seeing is obviously the velocity of releasing and engineering and, of course, developing cloud applications is increasing, kind of like it did when cloud security really hit mainstream 5 or 6 years ago. Security governance just needed to put its arms around it then. And that's really what's happening with AI now. And attackers are timing their attacks and their methods accordingly. They're leveraging, of course, AI as well. The agenda here is, we're going to look at the data set and what we've observed, in four main categories: services around AI, supply chain, overprivileged and inactive identities, and workloads. The research here, of course, you can search the report, but the QR code here will take you directly to what we're going to cover here in just, a handful of minutes, right? So every year, of course, Tenable releases research, sometimes twice a year from the cloud standpoint. And it's a great asset. Even prior to joining Tenable, as a peer of Tenable, as a competitor to Tenable in the cloud security space, I looked forward to their research because Tenable has a foundation in vulnerability management and data. And of course, in being the leader in vulnerability management and understanding that, and exposure management now, cloud security is a huge component of your exposure, your attack surface. And the data they were able to extract is outside of a specific vendor, was far-reaching, encompassing, and really unique. And now, when we looked at it this year, of course, we wanted to put a stronger lens on AI workloads, and we found basically the overarching theme of four domains converging. They're not independent. They converge into single traversable attack paths for nefarious actors out there, and that's AI services, and particularly the governance gap that applies to them right now. Again, it's the Wild West. Again, like cloud security applications 5 or 6 years ago, AI workloads, services, and things of that nature entering your network, changing our jobs, making us more scalable, more productive. Also, doesn't really have governance rules around it. So overprivileged IAMs and services can assume they're compromised. This is interconnected to, as you could understand, supply chain exposure, third-party code, and external accounts being entry vectors for attackers, and of course, dormant identities and the risks around them. It's not enough just to have, cloud entitlement and identity management, or KIM. You need to look at other ways that you're not downing your network or making mobilization effective. That's why just-in-time, or JIT, is a key way of making sure you can time in and time out certain credential access for users in your network, so that you have less of this issue with dormant security or dormant identity risk. But nonetheless, inactive credentials with admin level reach was a very common thing that we were surprised to see. That is not really locking the door to attacker. It's just leaving it open for them. It's just, at this day and age, it's going to become more important to like asset management, identity management is going to be key. And then, of course, we have sitting duck workloads, known exploited CVEs on EOL systems, very much like identities, but for software, right? So these four domains converge and really came up with some interesting insights from the research that, again, I encourage you to read. Focusing on AI services help us, as I mentioned, scale out the way that we do business, the way that we do our jobs, and they're scaling attacks. In fact, 18% of organizations with overprivileged IAM roles, particularly in AWS, were exposed. We were able to assume, 13% critical and 18% high in our data set. Nearly 3/4 of SageMaker default execution roles were inactive, preloaded, and abandoned. And of course, 3% had exposed AI keys in their cloud storage. OpenAI, Anthropic, all this stuff. I mean, For the audience here, obviously it's going to be largely a technical one. I'm building applications through, Claude, OpenAI. I'm linking into databases, both on a personal level and a work level, to extract and curate data to make us more efficient in how we answer questions and service our customers. And of course, our organizations that we serve are doing the same thing. The problem is it's kind of like shadow IT, but it's shadow AI. It's more particularly, hey, why are your keys exposed to all of these other different databases, software platforms that you're plugging into the back end of whatever AI service you're using, whether it be OpenAI, Anthropic, or Gemini? It does not matter. In the vibe coding era, 3% seems low, but that's really high. This is, again, leaving the door open to attackers. No need to look at a lock and how we need to make the infrastructure more secure. In this particular case, there's no excuse for it. So these three domains here converge together, and AI services cause a lot of problems. And two main domains: passive risk, through vulnerability packages, and of course, active threats through malicious packages. 80% of organizations have at least one third-party package with a critical severity vulnerability deployed in their cloud environment when we took this research, basically now. One third, 31%, had more than 100 such packages, which is just really profound, quite scary. From an active threat standpoint, 13% deployed packages compromised by live malware campaigns in Q3 2025 alone, just a few months ago. The moment that these were executed, the workload was already doing the attacker's work. There wasn't a need for exploitation. So there was no really unique, or I guess you could say, we didn't have to see attackers be super ingenious and fighting an exploit. There was none of that was even required. I mean, a great example of this is Shai Hulud and Singularity. So that goes to supply chain and looking at external access and just blast radius. And there's no reason to qualify it. Here's the stats. 34% of cloud resources had external access, access to external accounts. So 34% external accounts. That's the stat that you need to know. Nearly a quarter, 23% of cloud resources were accessible to internal accounts, which is quite scary, especially since this is an inside-in view. You should have improved governance of this. And at this day and age with AI and in cloud, that's a number that's just incredibly high. And even more striking, even this is the lowest number, cloud resources accessible to dormant accounts. There's no reason for this. So this is kind of like identity and entitlement management. It's great, but sometimes your entitlements are, linked to dormant accounts that should be cleaned out completely. Over half of external accounts can assume critical and excessive permissions. From our research, and 5% of external users already hold critical permissions. So no escalation needed there. Now we look at the dormancy gap. What we mean by this is overprivileged and inactive identities causing issues, and basically half of all identities with critical excessive permissions are inactive. So not only from our research did we see that a lot of identities had excessive or overactive permissions, if you will. 49% of them weren't even active accounts. They were unused for 90 plus days. So yeah, basically half of your most dangerous accounts are just sitting there idle. They're not even used. From non-human risk standpoint, it's a very similar figure of 52% rather than 49. 52% of organizations have non-human identities with critical and excessive permissions. Higher than human risk, 37%. Over-provisioned, rarely audited. This needs to stop, right? And this is something that we really looked at in detail. So here's the breakdown. 72% of human identities, when we look at identities with critical excessive permissions, 38% of them are non-human, and forgotten credentials altogether, 65%. And then we look at just sitting ducks, right? Workloads that are just sitting there. And this was pretty unique. So 82% of run workloads with known actively exploited CVEs or critical CVEs, with nearly 60% operating workloads on end-of-life operating systems. That's going to go bye-bye in a number of weeks, months. So what does this tell us? More dashboards, tools, and stuff is adding volume without reducing exposure. This is why exposure management is critical and why cloud security is such a key component. If you talk to analysts out there, today, what we're hearing and what our customers are telling us is like, hey, these new features and functions that you're establishing and packaging within your CNAPP solution are great, they're needed. But mostly, we just need to make sure that we unify and orchestrate the operationalization of action. I need to know where the risk is, who in the organization, identities, it's tethered to, and what they're using, accounts or exploited software or services. Everything needs to be brought together. So as this is also telling us that Advisor AI ingests your data, it summarizes your risk, and it produces a finding, and then it hands it back to you. That's not closing the gap. That's just more to read. And that's kind of why we are where we are today. So as I mentioned earlier, execution is basically the gap. And how do we execute? Well, 6 hours from disclosure to exploitation. That's really fast. Threats move at machine speed. With AI, they're incessant. They're not stopping. They're expanding, and responses can't be manual anymore. It's just not the way it needs to be. It can't be. And so, yeah, that orchestration of understanding, using AI to help understand storylines or threat stories, of triaging alerts, who does it affect, where can it actually move to within your organization is key. So Hexa is our approach. This is not a demo. This is us encouraging and providing an agent to our customers to search and query like they would in OpenAI, in Claude, in Gemini, you name it. In fact, you can. So we're bringing our threat management, our vulnerability management approach to cloud, and we're bringing that to basically your agents as well, allowing you to customize how you use the tool. Use it in Claude, by the way, if you'd like. And this provides cross-domain coverage, understand and utilize our data, our tooling, but also use, the competitors in the field. You can use natural language querying. This is important. This is how we're changing the way that we work. And it's changing the way that, CISOs and security engineers and leaders in the cloud space actually do their job. It still provides human in the loop controls, but it's providing that automation and AI help that's just really required today as we use AI to build apps, to facilitate our job and process data, and of course, to search for vulnerabilities and remediate them. So with that, we really thought the stats here and this most recent cloud research, cloud and AI risk report were pretty formative. It was a big change from just 6 months prior. That's why it actually has been our most popular downloaded asset. So many people downloaded at RSA. And we just think that it's the information that we're sharing is really helpful to not only identifying the problems and the risks associated with AI, but really how to, even outside of any vendor, what needs to be done to mitigate risk. So again, Thomas Nuth from Tenable, the head of product marketing, thank you so much for having me. I hope you download the report and you find it useful for your work.